Yeah, that is a good.
Or did Kenner? Was it Kendall or was it which Kardashian fucked up?
It was because they made that post or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was Kendall.
Yeah, it was Kendall did something, and then it got voted off the island as I assemble my pieces here, and we're live.
We're live everywhere.
Everywhere.
Officially live.
Launch Radio.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Life is grand.
Life is grand. I mean,
grand.
other than other than this coronavirus stuff, it's a little peculiar. We haven't talked about it since we did our podcast a few weeks ago, and it's kind of grown into a little bit of a pandemic.
It's everywhere apparently. Now there's like 3 different phases that you need for it to be a pandemic, and they're saying it's like 2 out of 3. I think I heard now. I'm not sure what those phases are, but it's definitely at the point now where growing. There's some growing concern.
Well, everything we're reading is like this is going to be the norm, and we're in like it's just going to be like the seasonal flu.
Well, that's. I mean, some people are saying that it's going to be like the seasonal flu.
So it's just like, well, you're just going to get it.
And then
you just deal with it. It's a new kind of flu, and we just have to roll with it.
So you can't tell which there's one reality where people are saying it's like the flu, and there's the other where it's, DEFCON 5 concern, and it can be tricky to tell which one's real.
Right.
I just accept that both are real, so I get very concerned, while at the same time being like, okay, well, in the other movie they just think it's a fluke. That both are real, so I get very concerned, while at the same time being like, okay, well, in the other movie they just think it's a fluke.
Sounds like you're from Paris.
Partisan.
Bipartisan?
Yeah, I can't even say partisan. I can't say words. That's I already decided.
Have we met?
I mean, I can't even say.
I botch up words constantly and think that that's my own language.
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
We make up our own words, and because there's.
When I first moved to LA, I could never say the word Cahuenga. Just couldn't do it.
Cahuenga.
I would say Chattanooga. And
and
people are like,
Cahuenga.
yes.
Wow.
And they're like, here, there's no T's in there. I'm like, no, it's my word. And they're like, so that word is supposed to mean Cahuenga. I'm like, yes, Chattanooga. Because I was like, I just created it as I don't care.
It's Kira language.
Correct.
And
There's
to me,
several of those.
I mean, when I was a kid, I called blueberry muffins voodoo muffins.
Why would you do that?
I had to say it, but I was a kid when I did that, and it was like I was very proud of the blueberry muffins of my word for them. But anyways, coronavirus.
The Geoff and Kira show.
Geoff and Kira.
Episode 35.
Episode 35. We're now Geoff and Kira. Doing all of that. We're going with Geoff and Kira because Geoff and Kira bring you the weekly fun times.
It's the weekly talk show.
It's the weekly riff on everything, and we bring the excitement and the riffing.
Correct. So it's the Geoff and Kira show now.
The Geoff and Kira show.
So welcome,
Geoff and Kira. Welcome all. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook.
All the things.
All the things. So we're excited about that. And
so yeah, Corona is interesting.
Corona's
we'll see
interesting.
how that evolves. But today is I thought is a really great topic to talk about and very in the now, in the present, in terms of things that influencing and YouTubers and all of that kind of stuff is like, it's so new still. We don't know what the future even looks like, let alone the present. Things are rapidly changing. Being an influencer now is such like a, nobody wants to be an influencer. It has such a terrible name to it, and YouTubing now is changing all the roles. We're like chained to all of these algorithms. So when the minute they change an algorithm, we're all like, oh, what do? We have to now, and then there's high profiled people that are just not doing YouTube anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, PewDiePie, I think, is still off of YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just an interesting where do we go from here? I think we're all getting over YouTube. No offense, YouTube, but
I think it got to a point Well, I mean, I think it's at a point where, I mean, we were watching that clip, that we talked about.
Yes.
Talking about on this talk show how it was over the fall, how he had slowed down. He had stopped for a bit, posting YouTube videos. And I mean, he's back posting now, but it's not at the rate that he was posting before. It's not as often. And I think he was talking about how it can take a toll on you,
right?
In the current environment, and we really haven't seen this before. And that as a YouTuber, you're creating, or as an Instagrammer, as a Twitter, whatever, a tweeter? I don't know what you call Twitter.
I think that's someone that does math.
A tweeter? Oh yeah. Okay. Hey, Twitter, what do you call an influencer on Twitter? I guess you wouldn't call it a tweeter.
Oh no, it's tweaker. That's what meth is.
Okay. She's here all week, everybody. Kira.
A tweeter? No, it's a tweaker. Is the meth people.
Yeah. So anyway, so you have to ask, Instagram influencers, just brilliant. She's brilliant.
I did go to college, by the way. You never know it.
I mean, you're very smart. CAA, Google, Kira, you're smart. Anyway, but I think that whether you're an influencer on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, like we've never had this place where you're in charge of everything from, creating your identity on it, to the script you're going from, to what the next episode is,
right,
to
the entire production,
your audience, to all of the post-production, which, by the way,
it's heavy lifting. We will tell you it is.
Let me tell you.
And it's not like you go like, okay, I'm going to be a brand. I'm going to be the brand. And you're like, okay, and now I'm Kardashian the next day. I mean, it is serious heavy lifting, and it's a very thankless thing we do.
Yeah.
To be honest. And I think because it's so new, and what Casey was talking about is like, we don't know the ramifications mentally of how it affects YouTubers and these stars and these influencers, if you so to speak, because you're putting yourself out there as your own self, and it's so overwhelming that you get exhausted by it, and then people are like, oh, your life is so hard, you create content. It's like, no, it's actually extremely difficult. I've gotten into arguments with some people, and even like but you're like kind of in the cusp, but you're still having another job, and then you're like trying to make it all work. It's very it's hard to.
And movie stars and actors but they weren't responsive. The their PR person, did the PR for
a team.
Yeah, and then you had, the post production of movies and stuff. Right. Most of them had studios and production companies doing that, and a lot of it became their own production company.
Look at the credits right after a movie. Look how long the credits are of how many amounts of money that just going to the production. When it comes to YouTube stars or any of us that do anything that we do in terms of like a brand, we are the brand, out there. We're doing literally everything. And you could make no dollars doing it, and you still do it because you love what you do and it's a passion. But that's the behind the stuff and then the ramifications of it mentally, like, you're seeing a lot of them burn out, and they'll get big, and then they're like, I can't do this anymore, and then they'll just go away with their millions and never go back on the YouTube. And what's interesting to me is like YouTube eats that up. They eat people alive. Do you know what I mean? They have to have this cult following toward YouTube stars in order to get the audience numbers. And they just kind of, YouTube doesn't really care about you or me or anyone else or the stars. They're just kind of like sucking out all their energy so that they can push out advertising. Yeah. So these poor people, and not poor in the sense of financially, but these people that are really trying to get the numbers up and get engagement, it's a full-time job. And if you're not there with a production whole crew, it can be mentally exhausting, And I think that, that's what Casey,
he was talking about that as well, and just how, where is this going as far as, for the influencer, what's next? Because he was saying on this that there's a whole slew of Vine stars, which is shut down. I mean, Vine doesn't even exist now. That they're all like, kind of in the past now, and they like had their run. But I think it begs the question. Like, I was thinking about while he was talking, that just like, I think in current day, the ability to continue to reinvent yourself and your brand and your just to keep reinventing yourself is so pivotal, because with people's attention span being so short, and with all of these networks, if you're a creative in creating yourself and developing yourself, I think that stands out in society today. And I think that the influencers who are surviving, and I don't know where influencers going long term. I mean, we're influencers, so we can't we can't diss influencers. Right. I love all my influencers that I talk to all the time, but I think it brings to the question of like how to keep reinventing yourself, because you're the brand, and that's a tricky question, and it's hard to do for a lot of people, and the long-term ramifications as to where that's going are very interesting, because actors and actresses had people creating their who they are
and their whole identity, whereas we're putting out our entire identity. We're 1000% authentic to who we are, but what toll does that take? Where's you almost have to put up a glass so that it's not, I've been stopped on the street. People recognize me, and men, you know what I mean? I don't mind talking about men's advocacy, but then I get home and I'm fucking drained, or like the amount of energy you put toward things and talking to people when you're out and about. And I love that. But then what's the balance, and I think in my personal life, it's just shifting as the mediums shift. As YouTube shifts into new algorithms, as Instagram switches, you have to then switch.
Yeah, you have to be able to keep up with that.
And it's
not easy to do.
And you're trying to explain that to people in your personal life, and they're like, well, it just seems like you're all over the place. Like, no, I'm just trying to keep up with what's happening. Yeah. It's moving so quickly. I'm for a whole website redesign right now because it's time for me to redo my own thing. Yeah. It's still amongst the same thread, but it's another way to go about it, And
Joseph says, on YouTube chat, he says you need you time to detox and rest too. And that's right.
Sure. And I think that's a struggle, is like, we don't work 9 to 5 jobs or 9 to 6 jobs. We work all the time. Mm-hmm. There is no like, I have an off day from building your brand. It's you. So of course you're out there and constantly posting and constantly thinking of things and content. And I'm constantly writing books, and ebooks that I'm pushing out. And there's never like an off time, but because the problem is when you're recognized out somewhere, I think I was telling you, I had a guy that I've known for a few years, a friend of mine, but, we didn't really communicate that much, but he came up to, he texted me or whatever. I was like, hey, this whole Laker thing with Kobe and the rape, and people were really like ganging up after he had passed away, of like, well, he deserved it. He's like, because you're a men's advocate, I want you to get on Instagram and post about the details of the actual court case.
This guy said this.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not a puppet. Yeah. Like I appreciate him immensely, but at the same time, just because you know what I mean? I love the feedback, but I also, I'm keeping to my own brand. Yeah. I'm not going to just push out content because you want that message out there. That you could push it out, but I don't agree with your stance.
Why do people think that? Why do they? So they think that. See, that's where things go wrong.
That's where it goes a problem, where the people on the outside are like, I think you should really do blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This isn't just like you're not working for a company. You're working for yourself. And I have to stay always true to myself, no matter what the external forces are telling me to do. Mm-hmm. Because if I allow people to seep in with their own stuff and what they think, it destroys the brand. And then you're basically become a sellout.
So you have to be able to do that.
You have to be able to just be like,
shh,
quiet everyone away. And you know what? He's right. Was it Jonathan?
Joseph. Joseph Barney.
You do need, I feel, people that, like you and I, and other people that do like influencing and all of that, need more downtime than people that have just regular jobs. And I think you and I both can say that because we've had other jobs in corporate world, and I'm way more exhausted. I'm much more passionate and I love what I do, but I'm way more exhausted and I need much more of a self-care than I did before.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because you're having to constantly be on with that.
I'm constantly on. If I go out and they want to talk about men's advocacy when I'm out at a bar, I'm now all of a sudden on. Now I'm K for Kira. And it's fine. K for Kira and Kira are the exact same person, but where's the downtime? You know what I mean? Where's the break? Where's the glass between you and that? Yeah,
and I think that's a good point. And it reminds me of I read a Gary V article. Now Gary V is, I really like Gary V, and I've written about him in columns a lot. I actually call Gary V the modern day Shakespeare. It's like my nickname for him, because he's the guy. He's very similar to how Shakespeare was. I mean, from what we read in history, he's very similar to how Shakespeare was in the language of social media. He's the original guy that was like, go out and do, he kind of created his own language around it with like documenting stuff. And Shakespeare created his own language as far as like art and theater.
About people posting things that they feel will jump their numbers and not being authentic to their content. I can tell his posts recently have a lot of that vein. Like he's getting annoyed of seeing people like they feel like they're so consumed about the numbers. So I'm going to switch my content. I've had people tell me that and give me opinions that I should change. Like maybe it's time
to try to get likes.
No, this is who I am. You have to be 100% authentic, and Gary's right when he talks about that, where Instagram doesn't allow it anymore. I mean, they're like,
it ain't going to change much. So go ahead and do it and realize that that's not what counts. I mean,
and they're realizing what a mental state it's causing in adults that are so consumed with like, oh, I didn't get 100 likes today. So now they have to figure out how to, okay, guys, step it back a bit. We realize we're an intricate part of your life, but let's not get crazy here.
That's a good point, that they created it and then now they're like,
they're like, oh, reverse. They're like, oh, we've noticed that this is completely out of hand now.
Yeah. And so I think I actually really, I tell people when they're debating about posting a tweet or posting an Instagram post because they're, nervous about it or they don't know what people think, the most engaging part of a tweet or whatever, an Instagram, a YouTube, is the moment before you post it where you're worried about posting it. So, because that's where you're most vulnerable.
It's really smart.
Because people like actors and actresses and stuff in movies, because the best actors and actresses, I learned this in acting class, are vulnerable and they show their flaws. And so when you're the most flawed as an influencer, that's what's watchable.
Right.
Like, that's what influences people.
If you couldn't tell, when I got stuck in my hoodie, that was the most vulnerable that I've been on the show. So I'm like,
it was a great moment.
Sweating. I'm like, I literally can't get out of this. But
it was terrific.
I mean, that's like a funny version of what you just said, but it's like, it's true. It's just be you.
Be in your.
But the problem is being you.
Yeah, correct.
Doesn't get. We don't really know the ramifications of what that's doing to us mentally, and we're seeing people exhausting out like this. There's the future of YouTubers is a very short window versus working in a corporate job for 10 years. You can't do YouTube for 10 years. You will burn out.
Yes.
And that's what's happening there. You see all these YouTube stars or influencers going up, and then they're like, then you don't see them again. And they're like, I can't, they're mental break,
I think and you mentioned talking about the future of it, and what's happening. I think that YouTube needs to figure out, I don't know what it is, but there needs to be more there needs to be something, just with advertisers and how to figure that out, and just how to connect with different influencers. I know YouTube, where things are going to go from here, and I think that, I also, there was an article I wrote where I talked about influencers, like how influencers differ from actors and actresses.
Mm.
And I said that, like, actors and actresses are, humanity vessels, I called them. Like, I actually think actress is very cliche. I don't think it's giving them justice, because they're coming from their humanity. Like, they're a vessel for humanity. And acting would say that you're, like, putting on a fake show or something.
Right.
Like, the term actor actress is very dated, and I don't like it. I think that a vessel, which Meryl Streep called it, is more in line.
Because it's coming from your whole being out into that persona.
It's your vulnerable humanity. Yeah, you're like a vessel. So actors and actresses are vessels for humanity, and content creators and influences are humanity's messengers. So,
Geoff,
like,
you're
vessel and
so
messenger.
smart today. You got last night.
I must have gotten more sleep or something.
That's really great, though. That's outstanding. I love that.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's how they're. It's how they're.
The messengers of humanity. I love that.
So it's how they're exchanging humanity, I guess, is the best way to put it.
So which one's more exhausting? Or are they both the same? It's like silent. Everything has a progression to it, right? I think Casey talked about it, where there was the silent era movie stars, and interestingly enough, where I live in Los Feliz, here in Los Angeles, is where all the silent movie stars lived. And up the road is one of the largest mansions in LA of one of the largest silent actresses that back in that era. And like Charlie Chaplin, it's a massive house. It's called the Cedars.
Mm-hmm.
Not to tell everyone where I live, but it's massive. But then she fell. It was Mrs. Talmadge, or Miss Talmadge, that owned the place, and there's streets named after her. But once silent movies turned into talkies, as they called it, she fell off the radar. Her voice, the minute she started talking, it was like, oh. But she was an amazing silent actor. So she was.
That's interesting.
So then she couldn't go into talkies because it was like, oh, it just wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
And then so she was gone. And then people started to progress. You know what I mean? Everything has a motion to it. And like, you look at movies and how that's changed. So YouTube and influencing is going to have the same progression. And I think we're in a weird state where you're seeing top creators being like, I'm burned out, And it's interesting to see how YouTube's going to handle that, because advertising on YouTube revolves around those creators. The way you sell YouTube to advertisers is based upon the YouTube creators.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, if you wanna reach people, the kid category, then you're like, here's all the massive creators and their reach and their channels. If they go away, YouTube's gonna go back to like everyone watching cat videos. Do you know what I mean? And that's where it started. We never had YouTube creators when YouTube first came out.
Yeah.
So what does the future look like, just from like a silent movie into talkies and into what it is? What does that progression look into? It went from people uploading about cats and doing weird things to now YouTube creation to like shows. YouTube has their own streaming and whatever. What's next for the creators and the authentic? I can't watch Regis and the Regis and Kelly show. That would never do well.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to watch that shit. So what is it?
I think that it's hard to. It's really hard to gauge that right now. I think that. I think one thing we have to look at is how, if or what virtual reality factors into things, and how that is going to factor in.
They have been talking about. I'm so sick of hearing about VR. They have been promising this, like, okay, this is the VR year at CES, and I have been hearing that for literally a decade.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, enough of VR until you guys have like literally figured it out, and we're all walking around with goggles, because like the VR.
What was it there? Like there was Google created.
Yeah, everyone has it.
Somebody else created glasses.
Everyone has it, and it's all bombing because it's just like you know why it's bombing? They can't get advertising in there.
They can't get advertising.
They can't figure out how to make it a needed thing in your life.
Yeah.
You know, so when you do YouTube, is YouTube a needed thing in your life? And I have a feeling people are going back to simplicity.
Simplicity.
Raw, and not put on the mask of that.
I think that's really interesting. It reminds me of, but engagement is queen, and she rules the house. I think it's interesting. Content is king, engagement is queen, and marketing's the castle to live in. Well,
it's a secret sauce. If you've got amazing content and you distribute it, it's a win. If your content sucks, you're not going to get one person to remotely look at your shit.
Right.
But that's the problem that Gary Vee talks about, where everyone's like, I'm so concerned about getting people, I'm going to switch my content in order to gain people. But then inherently, people are going to see right through your shit and know that you're not being authentic. But then the minute you're authentic, you're putting yourself out there for like millions to see, you know, and to comment and to have their own opinion. So that it's like, be 100% authentic, and like you and I are in our mediums and in our brand, and deal with the mental stuff and the everyday kind of stuff where you're, you know, everybody wants to hear your opinion on things because, you know, you're very active on Twitter, and it gets exhausting after a while. You're like, I just want to like be a consumer for like a minute, you know, I don't want to be hammered with questions. And I get the same thing when, you know, from an advocacy, it's exhausting. So then do you do that, or do you do what Gary Vee says not to do, and that's to create content for the people? For me personally, I have to create content for me. And if I think it's right and I think it's going to help someone, I don't care whether or not it gets one view or not, or a million. It doesn't matter. It's true to myself. If I lose myself in this, then I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah.
And people in acting, it's a good parallel. People lose themselves in the roles.
They lose themselves
because they get so ingrained, you know, that they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
And there's got to be that balance. And I think that's what Casey was, you know, going back to that that episode we were watching. What was it, H3?
Oh yeah, it was on a podcast called H3.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the you know, the description. But yeah, I think that's where things are going with that. And you know, to look back, I do think that, at least as far as the influencers go, the ones who kind of can keep up with that pace of being consistent,
right?
Over time, you improve over time in consistency, and you steadily do better. But here's the one thing about that, is we never hear about the ones who were consistent forever, and we never heard about them because we didn't hear about them.
Correct.
So it's easy to say, oh, 10 years ago, who are my buddies on there? You know, there's that, you know, Sean at Media Matters, and Roberto Blake, and Amy Landino, and Sunny Lenarduzzi. Like, you look at these YouTubers who I type with, they're all wonderful. Mindy the Lion, who died in a waterfall, who was the first YouTuber that I communicated with, and she gave me really good advice. Mindy the Lion, through Instagram chat, and we would talk. And then a few months later, there was that news where she fell over a waterfall in Canada and died. Her and 2 other influencers.
Shit.
Couldn't believe it. Mindy the Lion. And she was so nice to me in Instagram chat.
Oh, how awful.
She's a good friend of Sunny Lenarduzzi. But, you know, I would get advice from them early on. And we hear about the ones who were consistent for a long time doing it. If they're out there, they must be out there.
Imagine you just burn out and you're like, well, no one's interacting, or you start changing your content.
And,
you know,
or you start changing your content, or it also kind of makes you wonder if, like, I know this is going into sci-fi, which we like to go into on Geoff and Kira, but you also wonder how much the AI and the algorithm is to some degree like deciding for us. Like, how much is the AI not on purpose, but it's like pushing things because
100%.
it matches like from tweets to Facebook to any social network.
Talked, I mean, we didn't even tell our viewers and listeners that the minute we posted the coronavirus stuff, we were demonetized. Yeah, they didn't take it down. You couldn't monetize on it, and it's like, I'm sorry, it's not a conspiracy theory. Coronavirus isn't like, the world is flat. It's actually a real thing,
right?
And for them to demonetize, like, that's insane.
But it's insane. It's insane. But also, and here's the other thing you have to know is, and there's all sorts of famous quotes about this, but like talking about something controversial or the negative publicity or the whatever, it's controversial or it's negative or whatever, that also can boost you in the algorithm while you might be demonetized, but it's also boosting you because it's growing so you have to keep that in mind. Is like coronavirus, when we signed in and that was happening, that got more initial engagement than anything.
Even though we were demonetized. So then at that point, I think it goes back to our originating, like, the outside world that doesn't do that aren't creators and have a 9-to-5 job, which I, respect. Obviously, we both have that. Don't realize the ins and outs of every little thing. It's like, okay, so we got demonetized here. So does that mean we continue down? You're constantly trying to shift things, and it's like a Rubik's Cube.
It is.
You're constantly like, what if we do this way? And for me personally, for my brand, when I'm redesigning the site, I'm going into a subscription model because that's where everything's done, and you get within the package like a whole thing, like texting me if you have questions on relationship, all that stuff. But it's a way to just diversify away from the social networks, because you don't know. I don't want to be chained to these social networks that constantly change their algorithm, and you're just constantly like, they changed it. I gotta change the way I do things. I think websites need to go back to being your hub for everything, because you can control that. You and I and no one else can control what Instagram, Facebook, Twitter is going to do with their algorithm.
That is a great point. You have to have your own.
You have to have your own hub, because that's the only place where you can actually be and control your message. Because anywhere else, you may be demonetized. They may not show it. Oh, you showed a shadow of a nipple. Now you're off. Like, you can't control anything on these platforms.
That is so true, and everybody agrees on that.
For sure, and that's why I'm creating more of a hub for mine, where I'm like, what happens if Instagram just, okay, we don't feel like doing this tomorrow? Can you imagine all the influencers would be bawling their eyes out?
And big companies, they actually advise you to do that as well, because I think there's been so much backlash over it that I think they're probably tired of dealing with it, and I don't blame them. So you always have, like, that is a great point, to have your main hub.
That's yours, and no one goes, you're the only one that's touching it, or your web designer. And that way, if shit hits the fan and Instagram's like, I think we're just going to take, it's going this direction. They're taking likes down. They're hiding them. We all know this. It's plausible, and very soon, anytime it's going to happen. Yeah. And we're all just going to, and they start hiding likes. I posted on my Instagram, there was a model, influencer model, whatever, in Australia, and she's bawling her eyes out when she found out that Instagram was hiding her, like the Instagram was bawling her eyes out. Wow. And I'm like, okay, this is a problem. Yeah. This is what you guys created a monster in society. Now you're trying to clean it up, you know? And it's going to happen and YouTube's going to be the next, where they're going to change algorithm, And I just don't want to be chained to it. I want to own my own stuff. I will still be on all the platforms, but I don't want Instagram to be my hub, Well,
100%. And I think that's important to do. And it also just begs the question, as we, wind down here, I also think, like, is the algorithm kind of running the people, or are the people running the algorithm? So is the algorithm going off what people are watching, which is totally feasible because people are watching what they watch, so the algorithm behaves accordingly? Or is the algorithm deciding what the people get to watch and showing them accordingly. There's a lot of debate about that, and I think to talk about the question of where things are going, I think things, I proposed on Twitter recently, and the actress Piper, what's her name? Piper, she's in the Coyote Ugly.
Peter
Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers or something.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Something about Peter Piper from the Coyote Ugly. I think it's Piper. I don't know. It's Piper Paraboo from Coyote Ugly. That's it.
Jesus,
so
we got it. In there.
So Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Piper Paraboo really thought it was interesting. Like, she wanted to know more, and some other people responded too about this social media constitution of sorts, where you could somehow have a rule set digitally of how people communicate or something.
Wow.
And it would be something like a digital social media kind of to get everybody just balanced, so it's not so much the wild west.
If it wasn't a black box.
A black box.
You'll have posts that you're like, there's nothing wrong with this post, and it'll be like, you can't contact anyone on Instagram. There's nothing. There's no nudity. They'll just be like, we just take it down. I'm like, but you can't. There's no like There
needs to be a rule set.
There's nothing. YouTube does the same thing. Twitter, not so much, because they like all the back and forth controversy on there. But it's so weird how, and the problem is we're all chained to it as influencers and creators. We're all chained to these algorithms that we don't even know how they work.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that some type of a rule set could be interesting. But I don't know how they would do it. I tweeted it to Jack and the other Twitter guy. What's his name? The Miz or the Biz? The Twitter founders.
You can see my dumbfounded look.
The Miz is a professional wrestler. So here we go with the names and all that again. His name's Biz something. Biz Stone, I think. Biz Stone, Piper Pear.
Holy shit.
and Jack. No, these people, but I tweeted it at Jack and Biz, and they I would think something would be hopefully in the works with that, because that could be kind of interesting, right?
Damn, the name dropping today has been like on point.
On point.
Because it'll be like Peter Piper, and you're like, Piper, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like,
it's Piper Paraboo, if I said that right. Parabo or Paraboo. That's who it is. But anyway, God bless Piper.
I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, I do too.
What's YouTube saying?
So as the last thing, we'll see these last few questions if anybody has any. Joseph says, yeah, the internet is a blessing, even with YouTube alone, let alone everything else. I've seen a lot of people just quit caring about being demonetized and are fully funded by things like Patreon. Now, a lot of people are doing that now. So they're just using Patreon or other sources to fund them.
And then there's the YouTube. I forgot who it was, the really big YouTube star who was like so angry about the latest change in the YouTube algorithm that he refused to go on it ever again. It might have been PewDiePie. It was one of them that was like really big, and they were like
mad about
done and massive and just left. But I'm pretty sure it's PewDiePie, because I remember that being like
he was like the biggest.
Frankly, to be honest, no offense, YouTube, but like I don't watch any of these I don't watch anybody except like a few, but like I don't watch the makeup tutorial. Like I don't watch the content. Though I
watch magic videos.
Well, no wonder you get
I get all the advertising.
Hey, by the way, before we go, I completely forgot to mention, if you guys haven't seen our last show, watch it. It's about generations. And
Airing the Sweet.
And I'm like, that's ridiculous. And we started laughing about it. Sure as shit. There's an article that came out a couple days ago that like they're now.
And we just like click little things and it makes articles come out about it.
It's so funny. And now, so there is a Generation A, and it's like the 1990s. I don't even know at this point. 1997 to now. Now, would that be 20 years? No, it'd be the 2000 to 2020 people are Generation A.
Okay, so we've got Generation A now. So Kira and I created
They're
that.
They're just redoing the alphabet.
Yeah, Sim responded accordingly. But
hilarious.
Those are some of the things. I also found just we talk about simulation theory sometimes here. I saw that video today of Pete Buttigieg and Obama. Did you see that?
No.
And literally, there's like 5 like clips of them at different times on stage, and they're saying the exact same thing with the exact same wordings, like exactly the same, like gestures, mannerisms.
Weird.
And it's like, either he got coaching from Obama, or it's a massive coincidence, or we're in a simulation. So,
well, and
I'll let you draw.
You know, before we go, I have noticed, and we talked about before we started the show, of how crazy things are going on right in the world, where like Mandela effects all over the place.
Yeah.
Where like no one can find it.
And no one can remember it.
He's like, it happened.
Yeah.
Not one person.
Yeah.
So it's like, is this a Mandela effect? Because we were like, or is it just crazy Joe Biden?
So Joe's confused.
Then we've got Corona, where all the people from the ship, the Americans, the CDC says, do not have them come to the U.S. Do not.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put us on press release anywhere if you allow these Americans back into the country. They're not quarantined yet.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, apparently it was a massive fight on the Hill. They were like, don't put us in one press release. We're not in charge of this.
Well, Trump's sending them all to LA.
They're all sending to LA.
We're gonna get the coronavirus, with our masks and everything.
And Geoff is like, I got my he's like so stoked about his mask. He's like, I got my mask, I'm good.
I'm hiding out in a bunker.
Everything.
With my mask and my bottles of water.
So there's just a lot of peculiar, like I could go on and on. This week's been a very weird.
It's been a simulation
week.
There's other things.
What's his name?
Which one?
What's his name? Quito?
Oh, the kid who there's 2 realities.
Quidian?
Once you start seeing the 2 realities, you'll start seeing the 2 realities or more realities, like in every issue.
Is he 9? Is he 18? We still don't know. It's almost a week. We have no idea.
Just pick a reality. Like y'all already did, so I don't know why you think that the other reality like isn't there. But there's like 2 reality. Like I tell people I live in a dual reality.
Well, you do both.
And everybody
playing at the same time.
It's 2 movies, 1 screen, which we will also preview up here. Anyway, thank you guys.
Yes, this was fun. The official launch of Geoff and Kira.
Official launch of Geoff and Kira. Our next episode, we are going to have a guest. Like, we're pretty excited. Nuclear expert Mark Schneider is going to be in town from Virginia, and we're going to be talking about climate change and nuclear and all different potential solutions for, any type of climate change, just as far as global warming, as far as how to deal with hurricanes. I mean, his specialty is nuclear, and he's going to talk about how that influences, like, big time so we're going to be focused on that, but we'll be open to all things. And we want to hear from you guys. We want to talk to you Mark Schneider's going to be here. We're very excited.
Super excited, especially all the news coming out about Antarctica. Like,
yeah.
And we're going to deep dive into that. And I think, that's definitely going to be a really hot topic. I'm really excited to have him join it.
And thank you, everybody, Grim, Joseph, everybody else who was in the room talking. It was great seeing you guys. We'll be back next week. Geoff and Kira.
Thanks, Facebook. Thanks, YouTube. And thanks, Twitter.
Here at Geoff and Kira, we are the future, and the future is Geoff and Kira. I like that.
Guys. I like that.
Later. Bye. All right. And